All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Morgan Kennedy. I work for the Neighborhood Services Division here at City of Tempe, and we'd like to welcome you to our first of two public meetings held today for the Mars and Mercury Short Trip Pilot Program. Our second meeting will be held in person at the Tempe Transit Center in the Don Casano Room at 5:30 p.m. And we also ask today just a few housekeeping items. If you do have any questions, if you can leave them until the end of the presentation, just so we can get a clean recording. And with that, I will pass it to Sam Stevenson, the transit manager here at City of Tempe.
Thank you, Morgan. And hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our meeting to discuss some of the recent changes that we've rolled out on the Mars and Mercury routes, as Morgan had mentioned. My name is Sam Stevenson. I'm the transit manager for the City of Tempe. And I'd also like to introduce two members of my team, Emily Del Ross, our senior transportation planner, and then Trevor Malzewski, our transit operations coordinator. Emily and Trevor have led a lot of the research and analysis on this issue, and they're going to walk you through some of those details in this presentation. As Morgan mentioned, we're especially interested in gathering feedback from you today and for the next few weeks as well. Your thoughts on this project and how it impacts you are especially important, so please be sure to complete the survey that we've put together. I know that Emily will be sharing more about the survey in this upcoming presentation. Also, we'll be sure to stick around and answer any questions that you may have as well. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Trevor to kick off the presentation this afternoon.
Thank you. So an agenda for today, we're going to go through an overview of the orbit system. We're going to talk about the cost of providing the orbit system and how it's funded, the ridership on orbit, and then some of the passenger feedback that we've received, and specifically on Mars and Mercury on the issue of overcrowding. Then data and analysis that we did looking into that feedback, and then what we decided to implement today, which is the short trips program on the Mars and Mercury. And now that this service is in effect, some rider tips for using the Mars and Mercury, and then the timeline and next steps of the program. So Orbit stands for Outstanding Residential Bus in Tempe. Orbit is the neighborhood circulator network for Tempe. The circulator buses are buses that go into neighborhood areas, and then they connect to major activity centers. They connect to local bus routes, to light rail, to downtown ASU, and so on. Orbit was launched originally in 2007 and 2008. And with the first 5 routes that go from downtown Tempe being Mars and Mercury, and then the Venus, Jupiter, and Earth, and then eventually a 6th route, the Orbit Saturn, was established, and that goes from Tempe Library into South Tempe. The Mercury route has always kind of looked what it looks like today. The Mars has changed pretty significantly. It used to run also from Tempe Library, but it had lower ridership, and so it was extended more into North Tempe to the Price and Apache Light Rail Station, and then over time was rerouted and took the form that it has today. And the kind of hallmark of the all the orbit routes is the flag zones. The dotted lines on the map. You can wave your hand at the bus, and the operator will pull over and they'll pick you up. And then when you're on the bus, you can pull the cord, and if it's safe to get off, they will let you depart at any location inside of the flag zone. So Orbit is free to ride. It runs every day of the week, all throughout the year, and it has frequent service, which, as defined by Valley Metro, is service that runs every 15 minutes. And for those 5 routes that go from downtown Tempe, that's every 5 minutes, Monday through Saturday, and then on Sunday, running every 30 minutes. And then the Orbit Saturn goes every 30 minutes all week. Orbit vehicles are smaller than what we have on some of our other routes. They're about 30 feet in comparison to a typical 40 or 60 for other local bus routes. They're low emission, clean burning vehicles. They run on compressed natural gas, and we're also studying electrification in the future. They're low floor, easy access kneeling buses, and they have wheelchair ramps that are wheelchair accessible, and then 2 wheelchair positions where the seats can be folded up on each bus. There's 2 types of Orbit vehicles, as you can see on the slide. And then both of them has at least 2 bike racks on the front of the vehicle. So the Orbit system as a whole costs about $18 million to operate. The vast majority, about 17 million, comes from Tempe's dedicated half-cent transit tax that I believe was established in 1996. And then there's also funding from the federal government for preventative maintenance and some funds that come from the Arizona Lottery. And then the capital investment into purchasing the vehicles is kind of the opposite. So the vast majority, 85%, is funded by the federal government, and then 15% comes from the regional sales tax that was approved originally as Prop 400, and you may have seen on the ballot last year as Prop 479, and that funds a variety of different transportation infrastructure projects, operations, for a variety of different transportation modes, including bus transit. And so then the Orbit system itself is operated by Valley Metro. So Orbit has about 2 million passenger boardings every year. About half of that comes from Mars and Mercury. And so Orbit in general is very highly utilized. Mars and Mercury especially are very highly utilized. They're some of the most high ridership routes in the entire Valley Metro service area. And so with Mars and Mercury being such a big portion of the ridership, that means that there are a lot of people trying to use the Mars and Mercury buses at the same time. And so during the fall semester for ASU, we received a lot of feedback from passengers about high passenger volumes and overcrowding. You know, as I said, there are so many people trying to use the bus, then the buses are getting full, as you can see on the head sign of the bus on the slide. And so sometimes riders are going out into the street and attempting to board the bus, and they can't get on, and they have to wait an extra 15 minutes. And on some occasions, you know, rush hour is so busy, there are so many people using it that even that next bus might be full, right? So our riders, you know, they're depending on the service, and they need something that's reliable, and they have that expectation that if they go out on the street to catch the bus, that they can get on. And so we wanted to find a way within the limited resources that we do have to increase service and kind of relieve some of the crowding that we've seen, especially around at ASU and the surrounding area.
Yeah, thank you, Trevor. So after we started receiving some of that feedback from our riders, we immediately started diving in to the data and field observations. So first we went out in the field, we rode the service, and we also observed the service. So we really wanted to make sure of 2 things. One, that the service was being operated as intended. And then 2, that the buses truly were full to capacity when operators were having to pass up passengers. So we were able to observe just what our riders were reporting to us. The buses were full to capacity. There was really no more room for any riders to board. Then we started diving into the data. So first we looked at our ridership data. Luckily, we have automatic passenger counter equipment on all of our Orbit fleet, which means that we can look at ridership in a lot of different ways. We can look at by time of day, by route. We can look at the stop level. We also looked at our on-time performance data. So we did have passengers reporting that the on-time performance of the route was suffering, especially when there was crowding. We also looked at our fleet utilization. So looking at how many vehicles we have in our Orbit fleet versus how many vehicles it actually takes to run the service. And we found a few different trends in the data. First, we found that really only the Mars and the Mercury were having this overcrowding issue. It was only happening when ASU was in session and only happening Monday through Thursday. So we weren't seeing the same type of crowding happening on Fridays. It was also very directional. So with the heaviest crowding happening closest to downtown Tempe, in the morning that was inbound, headed into downtown, and in the afternoons that was outbound. So the heaviest concentration of crowding happening in downtown Tempe, and then with crowding getting lighter the further out. And we did confirm that some trips were having on-time performance issues because of the crowding. We also found that during some times of day, we had 2 to 3 buses available that we could use for additional service if we chose to. So with all that information in mind, we started developing a plan to deploy additional service to help alleviate the overcrowding when and where it was occurring. So we called this Orbit Short Trips. The service actually launched on January 27th, which is our most recent service change. And this is additional service that we added, so about 2 trips per hour that were inserted into the existing schedule, which means for some trips, that additional service was coming about every 7 to 8 minutes. And the added service is only happening in the parts of each route that are having the overcrowding issue. So on this map, you'll see the Mars in maroon and the Mercury in orange, and the bolded segments are where that additional service is added. So you'll see for the Mars, it's between Tempe Transportation Center and Dorsey and Broadway. And for the Mercury, it is between Tempe Transportation Center and 8th and McClintock. And because we were only seeing the issue Monday through Thursday when ASU was in session, we're only offering this additional service Monday through Thursday during ASU's spring and fall semesters. We're launching this as a pilot program for a couple reasons. So first, it allows for a quick implementation. We heard a lot of feedback from our riders. We were able to confirm what they were experiencing with the data. So we really wanted to get the service out there to help alleviate the problem as soon as possible. So the pilot service allows us to launch the service concurrently while doing the public outreach. So ordinarily that would the public outreach piece would push our timeline out a couple months. And then the second reason we want to use a pilot program for this is it allows us some flexibility. So we'll continue to monitor the service over the next year, and we'll be able to make changes to the service. If anything isn't kind of acting as we intended on the street, we'll be able to make changes. We can either maintain what we have out there now, we can change it, or potentially even eliminate the program if for some reason it's not successful. The additional service costs about $250,000 annually. This is about a 2% increase. We think that's reasonable given the amount of feedback that we heard from our riders and the types of issues that they were experiencing, especially because we already have the vehicles available in our fleet. So this actually gives us an opportunity to kind of maximize the use of the fleet that we've procured over the years. So a few tips for our riders. We really want to emphasize the importance of looking at the overhead sign as the bus approaches. So the overhead sign will give you which route you're on, which direction you're going, and the last stop. So with the additional short trips, riders will have some more options. So if you're going anywhere within the length of the short trip, you can get on either the full length trip or the short trip itself. And actually same goes for if you're going to ride the full length of the trip. You could ride a short trip to the end of its line, get off, and then board the full length trip. So really completely up to rider preference, which way you want to plan your trip. It's just giving you some more options. And then secondly, we want to remind our Orbit riders about flag zones. So Trevor mentioned how they work earlier. They're the dashed lines that you see in our PDF maps, or if you're using the Valley Metro app, the flag zones would be in between stops that have flag zone in the name. So anywhere within those segments, you can flag down a bus that's approaching you. It will pull over where it's safe to do so, and you can board. You don't have to be at a designated bus stop. And same with getting off of the bus. As Trevor mentioned, you'll pull the cord as you would on any of our other kind of local service, and the operator will pull over when it's safe to do so. So looking at our timeline and next steps, this is what we've done so far. So we've collected and analyzed data through fall of 2024. We took the short trips plan to the Transportation Commission in mid-January, and then the service launched on January 27th. And then today actually marks the beginning of our public comment period, which will run through March 4th. We have a survey that we would love for riders to fill out. We want to gain some more information on how people are using the service, if they find it useful, if there are things that they'd like to see changed. So we can find out about anything that maybe we don't know how it's operating out there, if it's something that we didn't intend. We really want to hear from our riders. So you can use this QR code, you can scan it and it'll take you to the survey. You can go to tempe.gov/forum, or you can go to tempe.gov/orbit, and there'll be links there to take you to the survey. And this information is posted on onboard signage on our Orbit vehicles. It's posted at bus stops. It was sent out on a postcard to residents in the surrounding areas. And it's also posted on social media. And then next steps going forward. So we'll continue to collect data, collect and analyze performance data and rider feedback through the fall of 2025. And then for January 2026, we'll decide whether we're going to maintain, adjust, or eliminate the short trip service. So that's really all we have to share with you today. This is our contact information. If you have any questions, we'd love to take them now, but if you think of anything later, you're welcome to reach out to any of us here. Thank you so much.
We do have one question in the chat. Feel free to come off mute if you want to ask questions or have comments, or I'm happy to read them. So we have one from Miriam. Do you offer orbit west of Mill Avenue?
I think I can take this one, unless Sam was. Yeah, so we have one orbit route that goes west of Mill, which is the Venus, and I can paste the link to the schedule and the route map in the chat. And so it kind of goes into the like Riverside Sunset neighborhood, and then kind of snakes around from like University onto Broadway, and then kind of back to Tempe Transportation Center in downtown Tempe. And that's the only orbit route that goes west. Well, the Saturn in South Tempe may also go west of Mill Ave in certain areas. I'd have to look at it, but yeah, in North Tempe, that's what that looks like.
So a follow-up to that, Miriam says, I'm looking for service on Kyrene from Southern to Baseline and on South Roosevelt from Southern to Broadway.
I'd be happy to jump in here. Thank you so much for the question. And it's certainly always encouraging when we hear areas of the city that would potentially support expansion of orbit service. So part of the service area that you mentioned here, Roosevelt and Broadway, that is actually a stop on the Venus route that Trevor mentioned. Understand that that route does not travel south of Broadway, further into I think the zone that you've outlined here. I will mention, one of the challenges we have is, just to be completely frank, the funding constraints within our program. So while we are here today to discuss an increase in service at around $250,000 a year, that cost is significantly less than what it would cost us to build out, if you will, an entirely new orbit route with service every 15 minutes. I think each of our routes, I know that we spend well over $1 million each year to operate each of our 6 routes. So it's certainly something that we can keep in mind for the future if additional funding becomes available through future initiatives. But I wanted to be clear that service to areas outside of these zones really comes down to the constraints that we have upon our transit fund, and just at this time the lack of additional funding to expand the service.
Thank you, Miriam. We have another follow-up from Miriam. There's no north-south service on Kyrene or South Roosevelt from Southern. it is very difficult to get to shopping, etc. Thank you for, go ahead, Tim.
Sure. No, thank you, Miriam. This is something that we can look into. You're absolutely correct. You know, Kyrene, north of Baseline, does not have transit service. Roosevelt, south of Broadway, does not have transit service. We have service on Southern, on Broadway, on Hardy. We certainly recognize as transit planners, you know, part of the challenge is accessibility to the system. So let us take a look, you know, at that area. We can also, you know, potentially, if you'd like to reach out to us or provide your contact information, we can maybe look at other options that exist, that may be able to better connect you to the system. Oh, Emily has it. Okay, excellent. So I'm glad to see that. I'm sure we'll stay in touch.
Okay, great. And yeah, that I know you'll follow up with each other and connect, but Miriam also was wondering if we could add two quick trips in those areas. So we'll be happy to follow up with you, Miriam. All right. Okay, and David, I see your hand raised. Feel free to come off mute if you'd like.
Hello, everyone. So I'm really happy that we're working to improve our transit service, especially at a time when we have budget constraints. So that's really meaningful. I do have a couple of questions or concerns because the short trips can sometimes be confusing for riders. I know you talked about like paying attention to the sign. I was also wondering if we're going to make sure that the announcements are also going to say short trips as well.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. Certainly, you know, for anyone who's visually impaired, of course, the signage overhead is not enough. And so I can confirm, David, that the external announcements for all of the vehicles, they announce the route, and they also announce the terminus for that trip. So for the short trips, um, it the announcement is different to the announcement that is made on the long trips, and the difference is the last stop for that trip. And we will certainly make sure, that those announcements are working correctly. I have observed here at the Tempe Transportation Center, from what I've seen so far, those short trips do announce as intended. So it's absolutely an important consideration.
So the other thing I wanted to ask about is there's going to be construction on University for 6 months, right? So that could potentially impact the results of this pilot, right? I mean, I'm just kind of wondering how we account for that because I'm worried that that's going to definitely disrupt bus service as it is. And so I'm trying to understand. I know that sometimes it can be an issue on Mill Avenue and in University at the same time. We're going to have buses every like 2 to 4 minutes on those streets. So is there any way that we're going to be working to speed up transit service during the construction period?
Yeah, thank you for that. And absolutely, there's quite a bit of construction, and especially on University, and on Mill in downtown right now. As far as speeding up transit service, we did think about detouring buses away from those construction zones, but we've decided not to do that just because then we're impacting access, right? If we pull the buses off of University Drive during the detour, we're no longer able to pick people up at those very busy stops. And so it's absolutely an excellent point. You know, that's something that we will need to take into account as we are analyzing the data that we're able to get off the buses, and also in the context of the feedback that we hear from passengers and residents as we're collecting that survey data as well. So I'm not sure that there's anything we can do in the near term to speed up that service, but we certainly will keep that in mind. It's important to remember that as we analyze how it's performing.
Yeah, I'm still looking forward to transit prioritization strategies because that's going to be really important. Because just to reiterate that we are going to have bus service every 2 to 4 minutes. So that's basically to the point of bus rapid transit now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have any comments or questions? You can type them in the chat or feel free to come off mute. All right. I think that covers it. I don't think we have any other questions, but if you do come up with any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us here on the slide. And then we highly recommend and encourage you to fill out our survey so we can get formal feedback on these services. And if you also want to join our in-person meeting tonight at 5:30 at the Don Casano room at Tempe Transit Center, we'd love to see you there. And with that, I think we'll say goodbye. Thank you so much and have a lovely afternoon.